So what I'm going to share with you today is the website, how to use it. Hopefully you'll all have devices you can get on and register. You don't have to register to access the documents, but in order to save them and use them with the students in the classroom, share them out, you would need to register for an account. All right, so first, right here is the register button. We do not collect any personal information. So for the teacher, you're registering for an account. Your students don't have to register for an account. You would just need your email. You would put whatever name in here you want and create a password. That's so that you have an account to store the documents and the lessons that you want to use in your classroom. That's the only thing that stays on here. We don't collect any personal information from students. We are Ed Law 2D compliant, and we will sign a third-party vendor contract if your district has one and requires it in order to use the website, stating that we collect no personal information. And I'll show you how that works with the students doing activities on the website. So we created a way to do that where we're not collecting any of their answers, their names, their information, nothing. So I'm going to log in, and I'm going to log in as a general user so you don't see all the back end stuff that is with my work account. When you log in, it takes you directly to your My Accounts page, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute and what's there. For general overview of the website, what you can find down here, if you go up to resources, we have a professional learning page. So if we are offering any workshops or advertising any workshops other places in your region are offering, it would be on that page. There's information specifically about the Diversity and Collaborative Knowledge Project here. The Student Research Award page, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. I will say about half of our entries come from Long Island. So I'm sure a few of you are aware of the program. It's kind of like History Day, but it's only for New York State students, grades 4 through 12. So where History Day starts at 6th grade, we have a 4-5 grade category, so elementary school students can participate as well. There's only 2 requirements to get a certificate of merit. You need to use primary sources, and you need to have an annotated bibliography. Those are the 2 requirements for a certificate of merit. And then we have honorable mentions, and then the winners get a cash award every year, and everybody gets certificates, and the winners get a framed certificate. So framed award. So information about that is right here on the website. We've got the guidelines. There's a poster you can download, display in your classroom or in your library, as the case may be, and then the entry form. So it's a very basic entry form, not a lot of information required. And you can submit online or you can mail them in. And our deadline's July 1st, which is really nice, especially if you have students who did History Day but didn't make it to the next level. They could always tweak their projects a little bit, and we get a lot of them that are submitted to Student Research Award. So that's a little bit about that. And then our magazine educator guides. I don't know how many of you get the magazine in your library or in your home, but this quarter's issue features the Culper Spiring, and also a story about Robert Townsend and an enslaved woman during the same time period. And her name was Liz, and the article talks about how the historians tracked down her information to learn her story, which is really valuable for those historical teaching those historical thinking skills to students. So I encourage you to check it out. The link I sent to Carl and Sarah and Judy has the articles attached. So you don't have to have the magazine to use the resource. We make all the articles featured in the educator guide available for free on our website. And also, if you register for an account, you will get 4 issues, the next 4 issues, including the current one, available to you for free digitally through Consider the Source in your My Account section. So that's another kind of perk of registering for an account. So the My Account page. You go to the My Account page. My Activities is where the landing page is. So these are all the activities I've created under this account, and whether they're published or public, it tells me that. You can share them directly to Google Classroom with students through this page or through an email with a link. So that makes it easy to share it out with students. You can bookmark anything on the website. So if you have a registered account, you can bookmark learning activities. You can bookmark primary sources for use later. So that makes it easy to keep track of what it is that you like to use on the website. And maybe you have things you want to recommend to teachers in your school district, in your building. You can, save them here so you can remember to do that. The My Classes section. So for use with Google Classroom, you can create class periods or class names in your account, so that when you assign it to students through Google Classroom, you can they can, when they complete the learning activity, they can have a drop-down menu that allows them to choose which section they're in or what class they're in, so that when they submit the PDF to you, which I'll show you that in a minute, you will know which class period or which class they belong to. So you can just add those here in your My Classes section. This is the My Magazine section. So here's where you would find the issues that you're having access to for free. And it's in a PDF format that you can download. And then your My Account information is just where you would change your password, that sort of thing. So this is the home page here. Again, there's the register or the login. Here's links to the larger sections there. And as you can see down here, we have over 2,000 documents on the website right now, and over 1,600 learning activities ready, created for you to use in the classroom or for teachers to use in the classroom. So if you just want to browse documents, so not learning activities, but just all the documents we have on here, you go to the purple bar here, browse, and it lands on the browse by topic. And these are the preset topics, so the documents are tagged with what topic they fall under. So you can browse by topic. You can also browse by historical era, by primary source type, by region, and right there's Long Island. So I'm going to do that in a second. And here's where you would see, if you just wanted to see your bookmarked items, I just have one bookmarked, but you're able to do that directly from this page. All right. Access learning activities, similar browse, except you'll see the added here is you can search by grade level, since it's a learning activity, by activity type, by thinking skills. So we added those categories when you're browsing the learning activities. And the build and share is where you would go to do something from scratch. So I'm going to show you in a second. You can edit any of the activities that are on here for your own purposes by saving them to your account. But you also could just start from scratch. And these are the types of activities you can build on the website. So there's 5 types here, and I'm going to talk about those in a little bit as well. Okay, so once you've registered for an account, and you go to the browse section, and you browse by, we're going to go by region, and take you to Long Island here. So we have, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the learning activities. So we're going to browse historical records, region, Long Island. And I'm going to click on this one here. Brookhaven Citizens for Peaceful Solutions Proposal for Hiring Site. And so it's from 2005, so a rather recent document, but it's on the history of immigration and labor and Latinx communities in on Long Island. So this is a document that we have already here. And so when you click on a document, you get the basic, the meta, we call it metadata, but the information about the document is over on this side, when it was created, type of document, region, all those things, where it's from. So we had done grant projects in the past where we partnered with repositories, and Hofstra was one of those places that we partnered with. And so this document comes from there. There's the rights, you have to use it for educational purposes. Now, if there's activities that this document appears in, they appear at the bottom of the page for the document. And this was part of a grant project that we did called La Escuela, and it was done in both English and Spanish. So the lessons are all done in English and Spanish, and they're all available through here. So you'll see there's a Spanish version of this lesson here. And then this is the English version here, and there's two here. One is a little more basic, that's this one. This one's a little more robust. So if you click on here, it takes you right to the learning activity. And this is the teacher instruction page. So you notice down here, there's suggested teaching instructions, a document description, a historical context, an essential question, check for understanding. This one had included historical challenges, so things to think about, other historical topics related to this, and interdisciplinary connections. So this one has art in Spanish and an ELA suggested connection. Now, if I wanted to use this, I had created this one, or I have not created this one. This was created through the Trust education team. So if I wanted to use this one, I would have to click the copy activity. Now I can look at what it would look like for students through here as well. So if you assigned it to your students, this is where they would land. And this one has the historical context for them. And then it also has the questions that go along with the document. So you can see there's quite a few questions for analyzing this document in particular. Now, if I want to use it and make it my own, I would copy it to my account. You have to give it a unique name. Even if you use the same exact name and put a 1 next to it or your initials, you need to do something to change the name slightly so that, we can't have more than one that has the same exact name. So we could just say, we could just call it hiring site flyer, and I'll make my copy. So it saves all the information that's with the original lesson. So if you want to keep it as it is, but use it with your students, you would just click through here and leave it exactly how it is. These are the tags that makes it searchable by the different categories I showed you before. And here's the document. So there's a couple options here on this page when you get to the primary source. You can add additional ones to this lesson if you want to include other ones and make it different. You can add them from our site. So if you click this button, it takes you here, and you can clear this. You can search the whole site for whatever documents that you would want. So for sake of argument, you wanted to add this one, you have an option here to add it directly to that lesson. I'm not going to do that though. Go back here. You can also upload your own document. So it has to be a JPEG, minimum 72 DPI, but you can upload your own document to the lesson as well. So if you have one that you like to use in the classroom or a teacher likes to use, you want to add to this one, you can do it right here. And you can also add from your bookmarks as well. Now, for individual documents, if you want to mark up the documents for students, you can do that as well. So you can edit the image, which allows you to crop it. Or you can add text. So you can type on the document as well. And shapes. So we had teachers say that they would like to be able to, put a circle around things or shade out certain areas. So you can do that all right here. You can also drop pins. So we have interactive pins that you can drop on the document. So if you want to call out attention for students to look at a particular thing, this would be good, especially for like political cartoons. You can, just drop. If you want them to, look at the image here, and then you could, ask a question, make a comment, draw their attention to it. You can do all those things here. So right now, I see there's a question. Thank you. For right now, just the teacher has the ability to mark up the document like this. so it's not able that students are able to do it within the activity. So this page is you describe the activity for your students. So introduction for students, conclusion for students, and then here's where you would describe it for other teachers. So lesson ideas. So say you were going to use this in a center activity, or you were going to assign it for students like a flipped classroom or something like that. Those directions you would type here for teachers. Anything you type in this box or this box will show up in the student lesson. So that's where you do all that here. You can, and these are just text editor boxes. You can delete parts, you can add things, whatever you want to do here to make it your own. Full range of things to do there. And then here's the questions. So for individual documents, we have an observation section, an analysis section, and a synthesis section. You can delete these. If you don't want to use a question, you just hit the red X, it goes away. If you want to move them around, you can do that. I'm not going to save this, so I won't save button. But if you want to add another question to any of these sections, you would do that here. You can just edit these questions. So maybe you like it, but you want to make the wording a little bit easier or more difficult for your students. You just edit the question like that. So that's the question section there. And then the final page is just publish and share. So if you've changed it, well, even if you haven't changed it, if you want to use it with your students, you have to publish it in your account in order for you to use it with your students. If you've changed it and you want to share it with other teachers so that when they search, they can find it as well, you would click this button here. So this allows you to use it with students. This one shares it with whoever else is using consider the source. This button here. You also see there's a direct share to Google Classroom button right here. And the share via email as well. You can also preview what the student version would look like and what it would look like for teachers on this page as well. So in a nutshell, that's the interpreting evidence document analysis piece. And that's how you would take an existing lesson and make it your own to share with your students, or share out with other teachers. Now, over the summer, we took some teachers and some school librarians to the Northport Historical Society, and those images that we found there have all been added. So there's some Civil War letters here, and there's quite a few on shipbuilding. So I was going to show you, there's this one here. I find this an impressive with the guys carrying these huge beams on their shoulders. But it's a good image of what shipbuilding, in this era, so 1900, would have looked like, what it would have been like. So this one doesn't have any lessons, as you can see underneath here. But if you're just browsing the documents and you want to create a brand new activity with a document that doesn't have an activity, you would just hit this orange button and you would choose which type of activity you would want to create. So just first, it's one document, we can do the interpreting evidence. So you just give it a name. You can even call it the same name as the document, since this is a learning activity and there's no other learning activity by that name. You can choose the thinking skill that your lesson will best represent, which historical era. This would probably be industrialization or turn of the century, World War I. Whichever your lesson fits, and then you would do all the tags here and create your activity, and it would be those same steps I just showed you prior. So, Indigenous communities and the geography of land dispossession, right? So for elementary, obviously you want to change the name a little bit. We do have another similar lesson called Why Do Maps Change, which would also be appropriate for using the same documents, appropriate for elementary. So here's these teachers' directions. This connects it to the social studies framework and the social studies practices. It has a setting the stage activity, where students would look at a Google Maps of their community today, and then you would have one from 1800s of the same community. And think about what would happen if everyone started using the maps from the 1800s to determine who gets to use the property, as opposed to using a modern map that designates, where the Stewart shop is, or the, 7-Eleven, or those sorts of things. So the idea is that maps have a lot of power. So depending on what the map says, who owns the land, determines how it gets used, and who gets to use it. So that's like an opening activity just to get that point across to students as they begin to look at these older maps. So the student view looks like this. And what it does is the compelling question is, how does the creation and existence of maps give some groups in society power and take away power from other groups? So it's really a lesson about, the power dynamic and struggle in a community based on, or state, based on what the map says. So the first map is from 1757. It's French and Indian War era map. But if you look closely at the map, you'll see most of the area is designated to be indigenous land. So a lot of it is Iroquois and Onondaga, Seneca. So, about half the map there. And this shows all of New England as well. I think that's the other interesting part about this map. So Massachusetts is like this weird area up here. New York really only goes to the Hudson. New Hampshire, there is no Vermont. New Hampshire comes all the way over. So just the idea that what you see today in a map of the state of New York is not what it's always looked like, I think is a lesson in and of itself. So here's the questions that the students would answer about this map. So it's the basic: when was it created? What war is it referring to? Who controls the majority of land on this map? Just with a basic quick glance at it. And then it takes you to 1788. It's about 30 years later. This map, you can start to see a little more structure here. New York has moved over a little bit to the other side of the Hudson. But again, all of this land, look closely, is still the various tribes of the Iroquois. So Mohawks and Oneida, all the way across to Seneca, to Lake Erie. So maps are nice because they're a good visual, and you can read them as much as you need to, or just a quick glance with boundaries gives you an idea as well. And then this is a slightly later, so post-Revolutionary War. And then this one brings you to 1890. And you can see where the reservations are. So again, analyzing this map would show you that now the borders are more established, and the indigenous populations have been reduced to just these small areas within New York State. So there's extension activities you can add to this as well. And here's a comparison activity within this one. But again, if you save this to your account, you can do whatever you'd like with it. You can take away some of these documents. You can change up the questions, just like I showed you in that last activity. They all work the same way. When you bring them into yours, you have full control over to change any aspect of the activity. But this is where I want to show you, this is how students would submit a document. So they would type their name here, and then these are the two classes I have created under my account. So my students, if I assign this to students, this is what they would see as a choice. They would select their class period, and then they would save it as a PDF. It saves as a PDF to their computer, whatever device they're on. And then that's how they would submit it to you, to the teacher. So either through, if you say submit it through Google Classroom, or email it to me, or print it off and bring it in, or save it, we'll print it off when you get here. However version of submission you have for students for electronic submission, they could do that here. You can also print these off. So if you go over here and you print the screen, it prints like this. So you could print this activity for use with your students directly in the classroom. Again, if you didn't want it to be this long, sometimes there's an extra depending on how the spacing is done, there's an extra page, but you would print it off, include whatever documents you wanted to for the classroom, print it off, and then you could give it to them in class that way. You can also just, when you click on a document, you can also right click and just save the image. So if you wanted to do something in a Google slide deck and just grab documents off the website, you can do that as well. So there's a lot of versatility in how you can access and make these available to your students in the classroom. So that was a chronological reasoning and causation activity, and that includes multiple documents with questions. You can put headings in. So there's all sorts of options there with the chronological reasoning and causation activity. Any questions up till now? I don't know if you want to type them in the chat box. You show again where questions are that can be edited. So within the lesson, how the questions same with the documents. If you wanted to put the documents in a different order, again, you just pull them, drag them, drop them. Of course, it's not going to cooperate. There we go. These are those headings. So down here at the bottom, you can see for multiple document, the chronological reasoning and causation, you can add a heading, you can add narrative. So say you had a document that was a lot of text, but you only wanted students focused on like a small section of it. You could include the document so they can see the original, and then you could just type in the narrative box the excerpt you wanted them focused on. So that's something you can do in this learning activity. You can also add a primary source, and you can add more questions as well. You can also require your students to answer all the questions. So it won't let them save it as a PDF until they have an answer in every box. So some teachers wanted that as an option when we did the beta testing. So that's included as an option here. Did that answer that question? Okay. We were just talking about adding to Padlet. So you mean adding the lesson to Padlet? Or you can elaborate on that. I just discovered Padlet a little while ago, and it's really a cool resource to use. And that's the other thing I want to say is, so this is the initial build of this website. So, as time goes on and teachers start to use it and give us feedback, I'm keeping track of the suggestions, things that we could add to it to make it a little bit more user-friendly, or things that teachers think would make it better for use with students. So you could add to Google Classroom and then add to Padlet. I see. So you all know all these these techie things. I don't know all of the stuff, so I'm still learning. But so when you write on a document, so that's the one thing that I would add for the next iteration of the website. Right now, the only way to write on a document is in that individual document piece. So let me go to interpreting the evidence. So if I'm going to build a new one from scratch, actually, let me find a new document. So I'm going to grab a shipbuilding one here. So I'm going to create an activity with this document. I'm going to create an interpreting the evidence activity. No fill. if I want them to focus on what the men are doing here, I could draw that there and save. Then I can also come over here with the pins, and I could drop a pin, and I could do the binoculars here. Just something like that for an example, to call their attention out to it. Close. I think I saved that. And then if I had instructions to write them here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that, but depending on how you're going to use it, instructions for teachers there. You don't have to put anything in those boxes. So that's the nice thing. If you're just using this for yourself and you're just trying to get a lesson ready to go for class, and what we also did is we pre-populated the basic questions. So the basic sourcing questions you would always want students thinking about when they look at a document, they're pre-populated for any lesson that you start, so that if you just want to do that basic thing with them, you don't have to type that every single time. But again, you can delete these, you can change them. But since I called out what are these men lifting, you could add a question in the analysis that follows that. So how heavy do you think that item was, or why do you think they were lifting it? And, why didn't they, why don't they have machines, or, whatever questioning you want to do with your students, to get them thinking about that document in whatever way you're using it, you would do here. But yeah, so the pen is how you draw or put shapes or add words, and then the pins icon is the one where you drop a pin and put a caption or a question or whatever it is that you want. All right, so any other questions at this point? I think I got them all. All right, so the next thing I want to show is from scratch, a comparison and contextualization. This is a nice activity for comparing two separate documents. And so here, I want to show you some documents on sand mining on Long Island. So Anne from Deer Park Middle School found some documents at the Northport Historical Society related to the environment and the debate over sand mining on the Long Island's North Shore in the 1930s. And the debate continued through the 50s and 60s. And so I'll just quick show you from scratch, and it's fairly easy, especially if you kind of know what it is you want to do with the documents for your students. We'll do historical comprehension, and again, this would be Great Depression, World War II, and they're written documents, the two I'm going to use. And they could be middle school or high school. I think they'd be a little bit much for upper elementary. Again, Long Island, industry, environment, labor, create the activity. So now I want to find some primary sources. So I would like to use and again, I already kind of know what I want to use. So so the Sand Mining Civic Association letter. So this was a letter written to those interested in the welfare of Northport, is what it reads, about a bill that's being passed, that was passed, that the governor needed to sign, related to prohibiting sand mining on the North Shore. So I'm going to add this one to my new activity. So you see there's many different ways to start, and you just find which one works for you depending on the situation. But and I'm also going to add a newspaper article because the governor vetoes the bill. It's FDR, governor at the time. And so I'm going to add this. I had a compelling question maybe for students to think about. So I think then this is the one that I think Anne had used in one of her lessons, something similar. But this debate between the environment and the economy, that you can't choose both, it's one over the other. That's a compelling question to think about with these documents. And the conclusion for your students, that would be good. Like if you had them do something for homework, or one of these lessons for homework, and then they were going to come in the next day and you wanted them to discuss what they learned. The conclusion is a nice place to kind of, in their minds say, okay, be thinking about this when you come into class tomorrow after doing this activity. So I'm going to save that. And then this is where I would say, so for this, and this is another thing that we would probably change in the future, is to be able to designate document 1, document 2. But you could just say for the civic association letter, who created civic association letter, and when was it created, who received it, all those basic questions you would ask about the document. And then you could ask the same. So if you go down here, add a question, drag it up here, say, so you can have the same questions, for each one. So that you're thinking about the two documents and comparing and contrasting them. And then the synthesis part, you would want to add a question of, what is the so again, but again, that's from scratch. And then there's the publish button to use with students. And then this would be the one that would share it out with everyone else to be able to find. But that's the basics of a comparison and contrasting lesson. And I showed you chronological reasoning and causation. And again, that's the one that has more documents, more options for headings and narration and things like that. The last two are two that we only have one of each created, and they're not the most amazing, but I think there's a lot of potential for these types of lessons. So let me just show you evaluating the lesson, and I've got a few people working on new ones, so they'll be up momentarily. But it's a scale. And so you pick multiple documents that you want students analyzing around a topic. And then you create two sides to the scale. So it could be an argument of, in support of child labor, against child labor is the example here, but it could be anything, but two diametrically opposed sides to something, or two different viewpoints, two different perspectives, two different aspects of a topic. And then you've got documents to go along with it. So the students would analyze each document, and you can create questions again underneath that go along with the documents to get them thinking about it. That's a cute one. And, but again, they're different sides to the same story. And so as they analyze them, they would bring them up here, you know, for or against. This one is the New York State Boys Working Reserve during World War I, where they had high school boys going out to the farms to help on the farms while the soldiers were away to help solve the labor issue. So again, but they could go on either side. But what you would do is you would create questions down here that gets your students telling you how they're analyzing the document and why they're putting it on the side that they're putting it on. But the scale tips based on you know how many you have. So if you put this over here, then it's gone that way. And when they answer the questions and then they save it as a PDF, the PDF saves the whole thing, including what their scale looks like at the end. So you would see that as the teacher, their final result in that lesson, in their answers. So then the other one is geographic reasoning. And again, we have a bunch of map templates. So here's the example that I've created. Again, it's a basic one. But so this is Erie Canal. And this map really wouldn't go on to that map, but this is a map of the canal as like a separate where everything falls along the canal. But this one's from Lyons. This one's, I think, from Lockport. I click on it. I gotta go to the student. So the students would see the template, and we have a template for New York State. We also have the United States, and then we have the Western Hemisphere. And so a lot of potential for these activities. I just don't have any really excellent examples quite yet. But that is another option. So if you go to geographic reasoning to start from scratch, click show you. I'm just selecting random things. Oh, this is where you choose your map though. So we have Africa, Asia, Australia, Eastern Hemisphere, Europe, New York State, New York, North America, South America, United States, Western Hemisphere, and then a global map. So you would pick the map that you want. Again, the level that you're going to be teaching. If you're doing the whole world, I would assume it's a global regional lesson. You know, maybe it's on communities around the world. Oh, apparently I already have a test. So this is what the map looks like. And again, you can drop captions and icons and draw attention to certain things. So if you wanted to like identify different places on the maps to orient the students, you could do that with the pins. And then you would also need to add primary sources for them to drag onto the map. So you would go to the website and find documents. And I can show you, just for an example. So we have 367 documents that are global history and geography from around the world. So, you know, if you selected, you know, 5 or 6 of these, maybe an image of farming in China, an image of farming in New York. I think we have images of gathering bananas down in the West Indies. So we've got images from around the world related to farming and agriculture. You could select those out, have the students analyze each one, and then drag them to the part of the world where they belong. So it gives them that geographic, they're thinking about where these communities existed. And then you can ask questions about, you know, why farming in China would have looked different than farming in New York based on the regional differences, the globe, something like that. So again, lots of possibilities for the mapping option. Any questions about those? All right, so with about a half hour left in this part, I think a break from hearing me talk for a minute would be good. And I'm going to show, and I may need to, let's say I have to probably stop sharing and reshare. I'm going to show a brief clip of John Heeg from Deer Park Middle School and Ann Latito Shu, also from Deer Park. They came to Northport Historical Society together, and did some research as a librarian social studies team, and developed some lessons together. And one of the final lesson I'm going to show you in this session, this part of the day, is one of Anne's lessons on the sand mining and the environment on Long Island. And her and John are going to work together to use that when John teaches the Depression era. I think they said maybe January or February. His students will come into the library, and Anne will do the 2 lessons that she created with the students, and do a thing around primary source analysis and historical interpretation, to go with John's lessons on the Depression and jobs and the economy and all of those things that were happening. So they'd be getting a lot of the historical context in the social studies classroom, and then diving into the primary sources with Anne in the library. So let me see here. Again, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box there. I think I will show John first. Share sound.
The Northport Historical Society, I would probably have to say, has been something I have been looking forward to in my career for a while.
Can everybody hear that okay? Just type in the box.
I think I've gotten to this point in my career where I have used a lot of resources in the classroom that I've either found from organizations like National History Day or other things that I've added creative, but that I've done through research. But I mean, the last couple of years, what I've really wanted to do was incorporate more of local history into my curriculum. And that is something that I have gotten better at across time, through the course of time, just doing it on my own. But I've also found that I also need really the help of people that are actually at these local historical societies, like, for example, in Northport, or out by me in East Marion, or at the Orient Point. I've had luck before you actually started all of this last year when it came to reaching out to people who were willing to help out educators like Amy Folk, and I've been able to use whatever resources that she gave me in the past. But going back to my experience at the Northport Historical Society, I mean, it was great to see that you had curators, you had museum educators, along with teachers, and everybody was on the same page. And I think probably some of the obstacles that I've had is trying to get them to understand
what big portion of it disappears. So here's where they're urging citizens to ask the governor to sign the bill. And these are the questions Anne created to go with that document. Here's another ad against the gravel company. So somewhat of a broadside sort of thing. Again, this is in 52. So even 20 years after the governor vetoed the bill, they're still fighting to end sand mining on the North Shore there. Here's the article where the governor vetoes the bill, that way I had pointed out earlier. And this was the letter to the Civic Association. And as you see, Anne just put the basic questions of what she wanted the students pulling out of the article or the document to go with each of the documents. So this again is a narrative box. So she's put in some information there. Newspaper article. So again, you copy this to your account. You can use as much or as little of it as you want. Add things, take them away. But that was Anne's lesson on the sand mining in the Depression era, using the documents that they found at the Northport Historical Society, and that she will co-teach in conjunction with John when he gets to his Depression era lessons. Other lessons that came out of that day Are any questions there? Again, pop in the chat box if you have any questions. Want to make sure you know, yes, this virtual presenting thing, I always feel like it's one-sided, and so if you have questions, please feel free. But we also have lessons around the Civil War. So John picked some Civil War letters of a local Northport farmer who served in the Civil War. I think one thing I wanted to show you here is the way we did this is, I know most students can't read cursive, and even teachers, some of the older cursive is harder to read. So we have transcripts, and they're page by page transcripts. So we thought it was important that the students see the original as they're reading the transcription. So page by page, this is what the letter says. And so John created a lesson, Civil War conditions on the battlefield and the home front, using broadsides, newspaper articles, and then also the letters. So he created two and created two. So there's, again, middle school. And then we also had an elementary school librarian from all the way out in the eastern side. It's escaping me at the moment. Southland, maybe? Yeah, I think that's what it is. Created lessons around transportation and change over time. So let me see, I'm just trying to find those lessons here. We're failing me at the moment. Here's one, evaluating primary sources, photographs, and prints. And this is actually a document that we have here at the State Archives. But it's one that we love because it's turn of the century, and it shows, this is New York Public Library, and it shows so many different levels of transportation. So you can see there's obviously people walking, but there's horse and buggy, there's trolleys, there's cars. I think a lot of times when you think of the changes in transportation, you don't think of the period of time where all of these forms of transportation existed in the same place at the same time. And how would you ever have navigated the roads in New York City when all of these types of transportation were in existence? So she's created a lesson around that for elementary, and then also images from the Northport Historical Transportation Then and Now. And this has a few more documents in it. Again, elementary, I believe fourth or fifth grade, fourth grade, I think, or I think fourth. But shows different forms of transportation, images from the Northport Historical Society, and you know, ask students just what they notice and what they see in the image, and then comparing them to see how transportation has changed. So that's an elementary level lesson there. And then the high school teacher did them around shipbuilding. So shipbuilding on Long Island. And student view is here. And that's the high school lesson. So how did the photos found at the Historical Society get put up on Consider the Source? So we took this, well, Northport came to the Institute, the Historical Society did, and they had met some of the teachers and they were very interested in working with teachers. So we were looking for a place where we could take the teachers over the summer to look at documents and brainstorm lesson ideas and start to create some lessons. And so they hosted us. And the agreement was anything the teachers chose for use for use in their lesson would be we uploaded them on the back end of Consider the Source. However, if you were to go to a historical society and find documents you wanted to use in a lesson, you could get JPEG scans and you could upload them into a lesson yourself, or you could contact us to have them added through the back end as well. But that's how we add them. So let me put it this way. For this purple bar browse side, all the documents you see in here have to be added on our end from behind, because when we do that, then all of this information is able to be added as well. When you add a learning activity, if you upload your own documents, they'll appear in here, and you'll give them a title in the any basic information in a description heading. But that's all that accompanies that document. But if you publish and share the lesson, then other teachers can access your lesson with those documents through the learning activity side. But the only way that they'll show up on this side, the browse side, is if we add them on the back end. But they agreed to submit all of their documents from Northport Historical that the teachers chose to use, to submit them to us so we could add them to Consider the Source. Does that answer the question? All right, any other question? Yes, Melissa McBride, Southfield. Thank you. Anything else? We're getting towards the end here. I think that was what I had to show you.
Jordan,
Yes,
Jordan, can I ask a direct question rather than typing it in? It's too much.
absolutely.
If somebody is going to upload a document they found on their own to create a lesson, what happens as far as like the rights for that if they share it? Like what do they need to have to be able to share that document they found maybe on a search about some other search?
Right. So for the main thing is it in open access? So if it's I want to say pre 1920 at this point, and it's not like someone's published work, but it's a primary source from a repository like Library of Congress or National Archives or another historical society, and they've made it available online. You can use it for educational use. I would caution you to make sure you try to find it where it exists in its original. So the students especially like to Google things, and so they'll like cite, oh, I got it from Google Images. Well, it's really not Google Images. It came from somewhere else. You as librarians will know that it has a repository. So like Google Images could show me something from Library of Congress, but I need to click on it, and then it has the sourcing information over on the side, and it can take me to the original location, which was probably Library of Congress, either exhibit or their online digital collections. So when you upload something on your own that way, there's a text box to put in what the document is, and there is where I would put courtesy Library of Congress, or wherever it happened to come from. You would just put next to the title when you type it in there. But again, being conscious of copyright laws and copyright permissions. But again, for educational use, it's usually okay. And we're not putting it up at a high resolution where somebody could download it and publish it in a book and not pay for the rights to publish it. Yes, Nicole at the library, Long Island Library Resource Council is also a great resource for questions like that as well. And she's working with us on this project, so she'd be a great resource. Any other questions? Comments? Did everybody go on and register for an account? So after lunch, I'll take you through some ideas on lessons that you can work on creating this afternoon in the workshop kind of portion of this, either from scratch or taking one that's already existing and making it your own for your student population at your school.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it is always free. It will always be free. Complete open access to anybody who wants to use it. Even homeschoolers or even people just interested in public history, anybody can have access to the website. So it's completely free and will always be free. Thank you for mentioning that. All right, so I'm going to join you back at 12:30. Is that correct?
Correct. Very much.
Oh, is there a button for citing? Consider the source. So I would say for citations, if your students or if you're going to use something off of here, pay special attention to that information on the right-hand side of the document that tells you where it actually is from. So you may have accessed it on Consider the Source, but make sure that you say, if it's from, Hofstra University, that when you cite the document, you're citing where it is originally from. But I do not have just a general citation button to click. I will write that down though for future development. All right, well, thank you, and I'll see you all in about an hour. Enjoy your lunch.
See you there.
We were just waiting for Nassau to rejoin.
Hey, Jordan,
Yes.
don't you have a list of some kind that has all the Long Island repositories that were interested in working with teachers and a contact name and number?
Yes, I do.
Because people have been asking about how would they decide like where to go and who to talk to.
Yes, and I can send that out when I'm off of here. Judy is joining us, right? Oh, there we go. Okay, hopefully you all had a wonderful lunch. And so for the second part of this, it's only gonna be about a half hour. But I just wanted to give you some ideas on some directions for lessons, and some documents that are available on Consider the Source to get you brainstorming and thinking about ways that you might leave today with just a little something from Consider the Source to either use in your instruction or to share out with the teachers in your building. Hopefully you've already seen some things that I've shown you that you see as relevant and connected to what your teachers and what you're doing at your schools. But let's see here. There's just a short presentation on historical thinking skills just to get, and literacy skills, just to get you thinking about ways to use documents in that setting, in that context. Share my screen here. All right. Hopefully you can all see that. So this is based off of the work of Sam Weinberg, Historical Thinking and Other Unnatural Acts, Reading Like a Historian, those books that are out there that you can at your leisure read and get more information. But these are the four major building blocks of historical interpretation. This is what historians do all the time when they research a topic and write about it and interpret the evidence that they find. So there's sourcing, close reading, corroboration, and contextualization. And so I'm just going to take you through briefly and talk about how, and I'm going to use the documents, actually, the documents that Anne had in her lesson, just to show you what this looks like with documents. So as I'm going through this, just be thinking about what you're doing in your schools and with your students and your teachers that would be relevant to this, and some ideas on what you might take away this afternoon, ready-made to use with your students. So first, this is a fantastic book. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. The article I mentioned that's in the current issue of the magazine that's also featured in the Educator Guide is based off of this book. And it's a nice dive into how a historian does their work and finds the evidence and puts the story together of someone who would have been kind of lost to the pages of history. Enslaved individuals are not featured in a lot of the documents, particularly ones found in government organizations, but the authors here were able to trace Lys's story and find out what happened to her and the roles that she played during the revolution. And they do a deep dive into the different historical contexts. So great example, if you have time to read it or even parts of it, it's a great book. And they're currently working on a middle level reading book, same topic, but for middle level readers. And I'm beta reading that actually this month. So that'll be out hopefully by next fall. That would be accessible for students to learn about Lys's story around the American Revolution. But how do historians get from a piece of information they may discover in a document to their research to an entire book or article on a particular topic? Well, they do these very basic skills that we can start teaching students as young as kindergarten, first grade, and build on that as they get up through middle school and high school, and eventually into college and the workforce and being active, engaged citizens. So sourcing, close reading, corroboration, contextualization, these are the things that different skills that they would be doing with the documents to interpret and analyze and synthesize information. I'm sure all as librarians, you're all familiar with the literacy standards and those skills that we would be teaching students. But this was that letter that Anne used in her lesson of the Civic Association, imploring people in the community to write to the governor and ask him to sign the bill. So sourcing, basic questions. Who made the document? When was it made? Who was it made for? How is it disseminated? How is it spread, or how is the information spread? What's the message or the argument? These are all questions that help us better understand the document and what it means. So if you look at a document in isolation and you don't ask these questions about it, you're not going to be able to understand what it's actually trying to say and what it's trying to do. You would have to understand that like this poster here was created in 1955. This was after citizens had been fighting for decades to try to stop sand mining in the community. You know, who is it made for? This is for obviously made for voters. Vote Good Government Party, March 15th. I love a lot of these posters all have like these different party names that we're just not familiar enough with today. But so this is obviously geared towards voters, trying to get them vote a particular way based on a particular argument. So what's the argument? You know, it's that the sand and gravel, you know, they're only paying 18 cents per year. You know, and they're doing all this damage to the environment and taking away all these parts of the land for their business, for their profit. So basic questions to ask, but if you don't ask them, and students don't think to ask these right off, you know, they have to be taught that these are the first things you think about when you look at a document. So sourcing is an important piece. And, you know, that's really a lower level skill. These are questions. Usually the document will show you the answer. If not, it's in the caption that goes with the document. But again, you could start at, you know, kindergarten, first grade. What do you see in the picture? You know, who made this picture? What kind of document is it? Is it a photograph? Is it a poster? Is it a map? Just those basic questions to get them thinking. By the time they're in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, it's the first thing they think about when they look at a document. You know, they feel very confident in being able to source a document, figure out where it came from, why it was created. Close reading. It's interesting, when I was teaching social studies, my students would complain all the time. This isn't English class, this is social studies. Well, they're very closely related. All those skills you're learning in your English class, you're going to use if you're doing social studies, like historians do social studies and researchers. So the closer reading, once you've sourced it, now you're asking some of these deeper questions. You know, what choices did the creator of the document make as they were putting the document together? And some of these questions will be more relevant for certain types of documents than others. I think political cartoons, asking the choices that the creator made, is an important piece in understanding how the cartoon came to look the way it did and why they exaggerated certain things. But that's where you start. What choices did the creator make in creating this document? This one, you know, is clearly a very short letter. So it's not meant to be a long read for the person that it was intended for. And it's very clear, they put right out there what it is that they want. You know, what does this say about the past? Well, clearly civic associations were an active part of Northport community during this time period. You know, they were the ones that were advocating for certain things to happen in their community for the protection and safety of those who live there. You know, and a letter, very common. You know, you might have students think about, how would you put this information out today? You most likely wouldn't send a letter like this. You might send out, you know, a lot of political organizations send out text messages, or they use social media, Facebook or Instagram, or, you know, any various, you know, things that students would be able to relate to. I think that's a great question to ask for a lot of documents that you're asking students to analyze. What would this look like today? If someone were sending this out. And then, you know, what does the document say? What does it not say? So this one clearly doesn't talk about why having sand mining would be a good thing to keep in the community. It's very much focused on the negative parts of sand mining and why we want to get rid of it. So looking at what it does say, but also what it doesn't say, is another important piece of close reading when you're trying to teach students how to pull apart a document and get at the heart of what it's trying to do and who it's trying to appeal to. All right, the corroboration. This is the part where analyzing one document is great, and it's great for building some of those more basic skills. But when it comes down to it, historians don't base their entire argument off of one document. They need a series of resources, whether primary, secondary, in order to build their case, to make their argument. They compare, they corroborate everything, and then they figure out, what does it all mean when it's put together? So that's the more complex part of the historical analysis and the historical thinking skills, is how do I take these multiple pieces of information and make an argument with them. So here you have workers working in the sand mine. So, looking at this document and thinking about how taking away the sand mining industry would impact the individuals who were working, probably not for great salaries, but it was a job and it was what they were dependent on for their income, how it might impact them, and why the Civic Association was arguing to get rid of sand mining. An aerial photo of the area they were mining and the idea that, that land was quickly disappearing as they were mining. So, how does it complicate the document? You look at one document and you say, oh yeah, that makes total sense. I completely agree with that. But then you can maybe look at 3 or 4 other documents and realize, oh, there's more than one side to the story. And, what does that tell us about the history and what happened and why things ended up the way they did? And especially disagreements. So, in an age where we struggle with discourse and having conversations, these things have been going on for centuries. So, there were times where there was more discourse and, people would disagree and they'd come to a compromise. So historical content and context gives us a good way in to talking about how we discuss things and disagree and come to compromises. So, but again, bringing all the evidence together. And then contextualization. So these documents were not created in a vacuum. They were created, like John said when he gave his little presentation, they weren't created for use in the classroom. We're using them to teach history and to teach skills, but they were clearly created in a particular time period for a particular purpose by people who had certain agendas and reasons for creating them. And so remembering that the documents used in the sand mining lesson are all around the time of the Great Depression and time right after, and what people were dealing with. So the governor cites that they had already agreed to give them permission to do the sand mining, but think about what other things were going on in the country and the state at the time that might have pushed his hand towards not passing that, vetoing the bill, not approving it. And there were lots of people out of work. So taking away sand mining was just going to put more people out of work. And not just people mining the sand, but the people building the roads and the buildings in the city where that sand was all going, though they were all dependent on that as well. So just the idea that there were other things going on during this time, not just the sand mining, that you need to consider and think about. So the contextualization is very important. And so we try to do that with our documents as we put together lessons, is provide some of that historical context, at least a paragraph or 2 for the teacher, so they have a better understanding of the significance of the documents and where they fit in the history. But again, teaching students to think about all those things as well. What do we know about what was going on? And why is that important to understanding these documents? So again, 4 big building blocks to historical thinking and interpretation that we want to be teaching students, but clearly we have to break it down, right? We've got to scaffold it. We've got to, start small and build upon those things so that they can get to the point where they put all 4 of these skills together in, an enduring issues essay on the global 10 regions, or, the essay, the thematic essay that's on the U.S. history regions coming out. All those skills are going to take years to develop to get to the point where they can efficiently and effectively use them on a test like that, and then also in the real world. And they're bombarded with information every day. And this goes to teaching that information literacy. How do I vet something? How do I determine if it's reliable? Is it valid? Comparing it with other sources to figure out, who's saying what and why are they saying it. So history, social studies, that's where those skills are really built and honed to create those citizens that can be active and engaged and think critically about things.